Welcome to episode 39 of It's Server Time. Today we have Note, we have Pronogo, but special guests, we have Daps. We're going to be hearing from the Team Liquid coach about what's been going on in the space. So, welcome Daps. I know that you guys have a pretty busy schedule ahead of you guys because of the World Finals, which you guys qualified for because it was kind of weird, like that ending situation, right? Where it's like you guys could have won your match and then you could have qualified from that, but you also needed somebody. Didn't you need like NIP to lose or something in the semifinals to also
Nip had to win the whole event for us to
for
not make it.
okay, so you had to basically like just prey on their downfall in some respects.
It was
So,
pretty high chance we were gonna make it. I don't think anyone would have beat Heroic, to be honest. So
okay,
Would
okay.
Nip still have qualified over you if you guys made it to second or not?
no, we were guaranteed. We guaranteed made it over OG. I think if we made second.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and then Nip
Okay.
would have replaced OG's spot. I think if they won the event.
Let's jump into some of this team talk already, or like I actually we'll start with your team. We're a bit on a limited schedule here, so if it feels like I'm rushing the pod, audience, that is true. That is what I'm doing. I am rushing the pod from topic to topic. So yeah, there's the bare bones of it. So Daps, I wanted to know, because we've talked about this on broadcast before, the fact that the way that Liquid is structured, obviously Nitro is the in-game leader, you're the coach, but YEKINDAR adds a lot. I'm sure that a couple other people contribute in some respects, but I want to know kind of that trio mostly between you, YEKINDAR, and Nitro, like who's bringing what to the table and how is it being carried out in the server?
For sure. So I mean, when YEKINDAR and I joined about 6-7 months ago now, at this point, it's actually been a while. When YEKINDAR and I first joined, the Team Liquid team with Shocks, I believe, they were like pretty much dead, I think, for the last like month or two before he decided to quit or whatever. So when YEKINDAR and I came to Liquid, there wasn't really too much that they had because they weren't practicing with Shocks anymore, I believe. For whatever reasons, because Shocks wanted to quit or whatever. So when we came to the team, it was like a complete overhaul. Like we literally did not keep a single thing that they had prior to us joining. And since there wasn't like much of a system, it was like a collective effort. Definitely at the start. I mean, obviously YEKINDAR played with Jame, and Jame is a very good IGL, and I'd say Jame definitely has a good system in terms of how they run the team, as obviously they won the major. So that's something that YEKINDAR brought a lot from their team in terms of the structure they had. And it was like similar structure kind of to how I ran my teams in like different ways, of course, but you know, we all came to like agreements on things that we'd all run in our past teams. And you know, I'm not really going to go into like percentages of who does what, but you know, at the start of Team Liquid, it was just Merrick's, Nitro, and I, and we'd be in the practice room for like 12, 13 hours a day.
Jeez.
So yeah, it's a system that's created by the three of us, and you know, that's a good thing. And we're also, you know, we're in the process of trying to get everyone else more involved in terms of like things that they want. But at the start, there wasn't like too much time. We had to kind of come to agreements on things right away and create like a basic structure. And you know, now we're trying to innovate even more.
There is a little bit of a narrative that I've noticed, and I don't know if this is fans running away with it or what, but obviously that when YEKINDAR first joined, there's all these interviews about how, oh, he's doing so great for us, he's really helping us. And, you know, reading between the lines, maybe some of that was like, you know, you're trying to, shall we say, like you try to big up your new addition, you're trying to make it clear that you're really welcoming him in. But I think some fans may have read super deep into that, and now they're thinking that YEKINDAR is responsible for everything. And conversely, obviously, in the last episode of the show, we talked about Nitro and how his rating was really low, and you know we had comparisons to Hooksy, which nobody ever really wants to be compared to. So I wanted to ask you about how Nitro's impact has been coming back from Valorant specifically. Like, what do you think with him under your tutelage, with obviously YEKINDAR now? Like you said, you didn't want to go into percentages, but what does Nitro specifically bring? Like when you're behind the team, really listening in on their comms and stuff. Like is he that voice
Are you
of
talking about like
Brehze?
you're talking about in game or before, like
It could be
before
either
the
one, yeah,
match.
whichever you think is more appropriate to this. But yeah, I was curious as his impact at this point, right?
I'd say in terms of like you're talking about impact just in terms of like calling and like structure.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, in terms of out of game, again, like I said, it's the three of us
Right.
that do the majority of the heavy lifting. You know, maybe on one map it's a little more, you know, YEKINDAR has more of a voice on this map and he has more of an idea of what he wants to do on that map, and then maybe another map, you know, Nitro has more ideas on that map. Like I'd say
Okay.
our system is definitely like, at least in the teams I used to IGL on, it was pretty much like 80-20 me. I'd say in this team it's definitely more of like a shared IGL role to an extent. Like there's some maps where YEKINDAR, maybe we're playing like Cloud9 for example, or like a team that YEKINDAR's very comfortable against, and he may call more that match, right? And then maybe there's a team that we're playing against where, again, like we're running the same system, but maybe a person on the, like Nitro has more of an idea of what he wants to call versus this team. So it's sort of to give like hard percentages. It's not like as black and white as that. It's matchup dependent in terms of like the actual calling during a match, and also prep dependent too. Because like Nitro and I will always do the prep no matter what, and YEKINDAR also does his own prep, I'd say most of the time, but there are some times where YEKINDAR won't do the prep because he wants to focus on like making sure his individual form stays high. And you know, in those matches as well, then you know he'll have less of an idea of what he wants to do potentially, and you know, it's hard to like give a clear answer,
No,
but
sure.
that's probably like the clearest I could make it.
Does not having like Nitro be the primary IGL in that sense, like, well, if it's being shared around in that kind of way, do you feel like it could hinder you in the long run in terms of like having a cohesive kind of idea behind what you're doing in game?
Yeah, that's something I brought up because it's definitely, at least in my experience, I've never really shared the IGLing,
Yeah.
to be honest. You know, I'd say the person I shared it the most with would have been like Automatic on Gen G. Was probably like the most someone mid-rounded or like in a team with me. But yeah, there was like always some concerns with like, you know, maybe we won't have like a strong identity, or maybe there could be like some inconsistencies depending on like what you just said. But it's not something that I'd say it's not something that's really hindered us, and the matches we have lost, it's not because of that, to be honest. Like I'd say that's like a logical point where that could become an issue, but so far I don't think that's been like a negative, at least.
And on the inverse point, like obviously when you have different leadership styles, because I'm imagining, right, YEKINDAR's not going to call the same kind of thing as Nitro would. And so if you do have that sort of swap off, like do you feel like that sometimes will give you a puncher's chance against an opponent who thinks they've anti-strategied you, but then you come out with something that maybe they weren't prepared for or they didn't know was going to happen in that round? Like has something like that occurred where you feel like, well, we really caught them off guard because of the fact that we're sort of sharing duties with IGLing? Or is it maybe more subtle than that in terms of how impactful the change is?
Yeah, again, I'd say yes. It has its advantages depending on the matchup, I'd say. Like, I think we definitely got a pretty big buff for CIS teams with YEKINDAR joining the team, just because he obviously played versus them a lot when he was on VP and Outsiders or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So he has a lot of experience playing versus CIS teams that maybe the players on the team didn't have prior to. And I mean, the last time I played, the CIS teams looked all different. So, you know,
Right.
I don't have too much experience versus the current CIS teams when I was playing, at least. So, yeah, matchup wise, it definitely helps depending on the team. And yeah, I mean, that's all I really have to say on that.
I wanted to. Oh yeah, go for it.
I was just wondering if you found you've ever had to like rein YEKINDAR in on some of these rounds or not, because obviously like he is very aggressive, but there are times where like he will bash his head into like banana in a map until it either falls apart or you guys do. So I'm wondering if there's times where you're like, okay, like we do, like pull yourself back a bit if you've had to tell him that, or if Nick has had to tell him that?
He's generally pretty good at recognizing that himself. But there has been the odd match where I've had to pause and be like, let's just let them execute. Their executes, like, just let's let them do something. Like, let's not
Let the
throw
action
away our
come to
life.
you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In short, so there has been the odd time that's happened, but generally, Yekindar's a very smart player, so he understands if it's just not working.
Yeah, what a lot of the top analysts in the space were saying about Yekinder back when he was on VP and Outsiders is that, you think about the way that he can morph the patterns of play. Like, one of the reasons why that team is such a confusing team for most people, especially when Yekinder was still on the roster, is that, like, okay, you can't expect him to go super aggro, CT side or T side. You don't know which one he's going to be. But if, James does a call where it's like, actually pull back, like, oh, now you're like expecting it, but it doesn't happen. So I'm sure that's a huge asset for you guys in general, because when it's working, obviously that's like an OP tool in your toolbox. Like, okay, yeah, they're going to start every round T side 4v5 because we've got Yekinder on CT side pushing, banana or whatever. And then conversely, the same thing can obviously happen on T side. But for me, I do feel like, it's actually beneficial if you can recognize when you're being read, obviously. But in that particular case, it can be so impactful because it's not like, oh, no matter what happens, we can do the same thing. It's like, in this case, if he's being aggressive, we have to play completely differently. And if he's being passive, well, then that more passive play on our side where we wait for him is just going to burn seconds off the clock. And now, maybe we're at a disadvantage because of that. So I'm sure just from that angle, it's like, must be one of the dream pieces for any IGL or coaches. Like, that you can really morph any sort of round and have like a puncher's chance in that sense, even if you're like on a low buy or something, right?
Yeah, and I think, Yekinder's just such a good pickup because he contrasts the rest of the players nicely, in my opinion. Like, the rest of the team isn't too aggressive, and he fits that role perfectly and makes a lot of space for everyone else to have room. So overall, yeah, it's a perfect pickup.
Could you then elaborate on how, because like for example, ELiGE's numbers got a lot better after Yekinder joined the roster. So what do you think that, like, ELiGE was, I'd say, on the last iteration of Liquid, kind of having to do some of a lot. I mean, he was doing a lot of the entry stuff in general, but now he gets to be second in more or less. And do you think that this is like a better natural fit for ELiGE, or would ELiGE actually want to be more aggressive, or is he just letting Yekinder do this, or is this a good fit overall?
I think it's a very good fit just because Yekinder is the second IGL, and since he's taking a lot of those initial engagements, he's able to control the tempo more himself while also like microing what he wants from people, which I think is a strength he has over John or ELiGE. Because I don't think, at least like I didn't play with ELiGE really except for like 2015, like for a little bit. So I don't think ELiGE has ever really been a second IGL on a team. He has ideas and stuff, but it's not to the extent where like Yekinder's full microing like things he wants as the guy entering, right? Which is super important. So not only will he like micro the situation that he wants while he's entering, but he's also making a lot of space for John or ELiGE, sorry. And like ELiGE's best role, in my opinion, is trading. Like going second, ELiGE is always good for a trade, 100%. Like it's pretty rare where he's gonna miss a trade kill. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like the perfect duo package there. Like in terms of roles, I'd say the only role where we're kind of like it's weird is because we don't have like a second lurk too much. Like it's kind of shared between like ELiGE and Nitro on some maps. But I mean, other than that, like the roles are fit really well for like the entry pack.
Yeah, I guess Yekinder did lurk B on Vertigo for you guys for like some rounds, which was always a little strange to watch. But
We tried that for a bit. I mean, it
yeah.
was like okay, but
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I wouldn't have preferred watching him there when he's just such a beast at ramp. But I kind of wanted to zoom out a little bit on, because you kind of mentioned also like your past, and I mean, you played with ELiGE super briefly, but like I want to know.
Can I chuck in one more question about
Yeah.
ELiGE before we go past? I'm just wondering with the two heroic matches you had between Rio and Blast, like ELiGE specifically didn't have a great performance. Is it just something about heroic style or the way that they're playing that was shutting him down, or was it just kind of him faltering in those matches?
I don't want to speak for him. Like that's sort of like his question to answer.
Okay.
But my opinion on the two heroic matches we lost. You're talking about the recent Blast, right? And not the Blast groups where we beat
Yeah,
them,
the
right?
recent Blast and then at
okay.
Rio as well.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, I'd say Vertigo. Vertigo's like a map where I'd say we're both like, it's both our middle map or like average map. But I think our game plan on Vertigo is just incorrect. So I don't think it's really necessarily a fault of ELiGE in that match. As for the other maps, that's just sort of a question for him to ask himself. I haven't got to rewatch the match yet, the last heroic match, so I can't speak too much on it from like his point of view without actually rewatching the last Blast BO3, which I'm doing tomorrow. So
Okay. So zooming out, this is kind of like what I would consider, even though you technically coach on EG before this, and I'm not even gonna get into what happened. Yeah, I'm not. I'm like, I'll just say what I know, and you can choose to not comment on it if you want. But like, more or less, I know that was like an effed up situation, like because that team looked like it was just like a weird structure. I think everybody has like said things in the past about EG and like their management style and what powers they give to different people and what's going to be coming around the corner, what's next for them. So I think that was a situation where you were set up to fail, and maybe that's true, maybe it's not true, but I'm pretty sure you were set up to fail pretty hard at EG. But for Liquid, I'm sure you took some things that you learned from that EG experience and in general, and now you have a certain style that you brought to Liquid as a coach. And we were talking before before this podcast about just like what you think a coach should bring. So would you want to just give us a little bit of your philosophy on what you think it takes to be a good coach with the experience you have now on it?
Sure. I'd say I've read a lot of books, TED Talks. I've had a lot of coaches over my career, so I've kind of just taken as much as I can from everything to try and apply it. And I mean, the truth for me is that while coaches will have like their own styles, I think it's good to apply the best style for the situation you're in personally. Like on Energy with Chet, or when I was IGLing with Chet, it was my system, my team before he joined, and he came in and complimented me very nicely. He wasn't a coach who came in and tried to like overtake my system and force his hand and change everything. He came in and made our system better, made the players better where there's weaknesses. And I think that's super important for a coach to do, because I do feel like there's some coaches who I don't know if they want the credit per se, but they want to show that they're a good coach rather than actually being a good coach. I don't know if that makes sense or if I'm explaining it well.
It's like they want to put their stamp so much on the team that might not even be necessarily what the team needs in terms of additions. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, personally for me, when I joined this team, I thought I didn't know much about YEKINDAR. I thought, I'd come in and I'd be heavy on the tactic side in terms of like bringing the systems I used to create for my old teams. Where actually YEKINDAR was bringing a lot, Nitro had a lot, and then it was more of a shared workload, right, in that regard. And that way I could focus more of my efforts on, everyone always said Team Liquid's mental is dog shit, or the environment's dog shit. So it's like trying my best to make a good environment, which is something I did well on most of my teams. So trying to make good environment, make sure everyone feels like they're, part of a team and where we can like grow and learn together. And, there's still like some mental battles we have, but, it's definitely, from what I've been told from the previous iterations, it's definitely in a better place than what it used to be. But there's still, it's a work in progress still.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a little bit about. Oh, go ahead, Noah.
Did you get to know some of the players when you joined over perhaps a Starbucks coffee?
Wow.
Yeah, I actually I was scared of that, so I asked for Dunkin' Donuts instead.
There it is. There.
Well done.
No, I wanted to ask a little bit deeper about the the emotional status of the team, so to speak, during some of these close losses, especially. I've talked about like the narrative of YEKINDAR like fixing everything for Liquid when he joined, and how that's most likely quite overblown, even though he is obviously a good piece. And there's another narrative that I think at this point is very outdated. But every time Liquid, starts to lose a game or something, it's always like, oh, they're choking, they're chokewood or whatever. And so asking it in this way, obviously feel free to comment or not, but it seems to me like that has improved since you've joined. And obviously you weren't watching over them before you were the coach, so you can't necessarily speak to, like you said, you were only really told what it was like before. But have you seen like an improvement since you've joined to the point where we're at now with how the team handles these tough losses? Like obviously the one at the major, for example, everybody knows those iconic photos taken of ELiGE afterwards. He's clearly heartbroken, but that's after the game, right? And maybe leading up to it, the mood was better, or they still felt like they were in, or like how would you, to the degree you want to speak to it, what would you say to the idea that maybe the mood in the team can be fragile during some of these really close matches?
Yeah, it definitely depends on the situation. Like I'd say our mental in the heroic game at the major was significantly worse than in the spirit game. Even though we
Okay.
lost both series, we were in the spirit BO3 till the end.
Right.
But spirit is just a bad matchup for us. Like they destroy us in scrims. Like we don't like playing them for
Okay.
whatever reason. Patsy's a god. Patsy's
Mhm.
my sleeper pick and everything. But
There it is.
yeah, in the heroic game, we definitely ran into some issues, and it's tricky during a game, right? Because you have to balance sort of like, if people are getting emotional, it's tricky because you could call the person out hard, but then you could risk like ruining the whole series potentially
Yeah.
if things go wrong. And then you can try and focus. Like I think a better strategy is trying to get them into the game. Like maybe call something that gets a player like more or like more pumped, more confident in themselves, trying to set them up more, and taking like the workload off of them. Like even like one thing in my old team, like I obviously wasn't the greatest player in terms of individual skill, but if I was having like a bad game, like a ticket on Mirage, cerq would just op A and I would go middle or something, try and like move me at a position, get me in more like easier fights, like somewhere where I can have more confidence. So again, that's sort of what happened at the major, I'd say, was we should have probably beat her. Like it was like what, 11-11 CT overpass and we all had like
Yeah.
12K. So I mean, that was a series that we really had in our hands. But we kind of threw it away. And then what was the other event you said?
There was just like I was talking about the spirit matchup, which you already kind of covered, right? Which is like
Oh
the
yeah,
very last
the
match.
mental was amazing in that series.
Is there something specific, whether it just be like one point or a few, that you could point towards as a reason the mental was worse in the heroic game than the spirit game?
I think it was just, well, it was just the pressure, I feel, of just our mental going into the major was insanely good because we had the best boot camp we'd ever had as a team. We were scrimming only tier 1 teams the whole time before the major and having good results versus them. All our maps felt really good. I know people like to shit on our Vertigo, but Vertigo is like the only map we didn't lose a scrim on the whole boot camp. I think we were like 9-0 or 10-0 or something, beating
Okay.
good teams on it. So like we felt good on every map. We felt the most confident we had ever been going into an event with this lineup. And I think it was just, I don't want to say it's because we played in front of the crowd every match, but we definitely weren't as prepared, I think, for the pressure or the expectation, I'd say. Because like there was even articles saying we're expected to win the event and stuff. I'm like, we've been a team for like 5 months. So it's like, I think that instant, because I don't know, do you know what Liquid was ranked before the roster changes?
Probably
number.
fourth.
Oh, before the roster
Yeah.
changes.
Oh, before that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I can
I
check.
don't know about that.
Pretty-
That's
Like with shocks.
I think they were out of the top 10 even. Might have been 11th.
That wouldn't
They
surprise me.
were like 13th,
Okay.
14th area.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was just a mixture of like, and I don't know how long they were in that state, but it's just like, it was just definitely a combination of just like crazy expectations after making finals at EPL, and we didn't beat the best teams to make the finals at EPL either. No shit talk towards Fnatic and Mouse, but they're newer teams as well. In that same like trying to battle to the top. So my point is I think the pressure got to us at that point, which is sort of the expectations. We're ranked higher, and it all, even though like you have experienced players on the team, it's still always a mental battle to deal with that expectation of like you have to perform the best. You're expected to win the tournament now, and I think that was what got us.
Yeah, there were a lot of dark horse picks for Liquid, but there were also like, I think there was an article on HLTV, might have been an interview with Nitro himself, who said something to the effect of like, we expect to go really far, or something to that effect, right? It's like we
believed it too.
Yeah,
but that's what I'm saying is like we truly believed it, because like we had an insane boot camp, and then we come into the major and we fall flat versus Mouse. I mean, that's like the worst map we've ever lost, I think, as a team. But we just came in flat, and then we definitely didn't lose confidence from that game, because if you lose 16-2, it's just like it's one of those days. It's not like
that was just Frozen, right? Or like Frozen was just running at you guys. Or
I mean,
JDC also was just
JDC. I think top for
So like
they had a game and we had a complete off game. But I don't need to harp on it anymore. That's pretty much the major.
Let's shift then to something that's a little more positive that you may be able to provide some insight on. That's just like everybody's been seeing the Cloud9 matchup between you guys, where you guys have beaten them now 3 times in a row, Cologne once and then twice at ESL Pro League. And I mean, what specifically about that matchup? Because people can see Cloud9, people can see like I see their weaknesses. I've like gotten very public about what I don't like about watching them play, but like they do beat a lot of good teams, but you guys seem to have their number. So can you shed any light on that?
Yeah, I'm not going to go into specifics, just because I don't want to say anything that I don't want them to fix their issues either. But
there it
is. They're an amazing team, and like even if we do know how to beat them, it's still a hard game regardless. But I think definitely the addition of YEKINDAR helps in that matchup. As I said before, like any CIS team we play against, like even NaVi included, it's just he has so many reps.
Oh, and he's out.
No.
He's gone.
Okay. Let's
We're back.
Okay. So yeah, I'd say without going into specifics, the Cloud9 matchup is just they have their comfort zones, and it's a hard matchup for them versus us, because if they try and go out of their comfort zones to surprise us, then they're just not playing their game that they're so used to, and it will probably be more inconsistent for them. And even if they try and go out of their comfort zones to counter us in a way, then it's just we're not going to not be ready for it as well on top of that. So it's just sort of like it's a tricky situation for them, and CS is a very matchup dependent game as well. So, and they also don't have like a very good, like their map pool's good, but they don't have a necessarily strong pick versus us. Like they could pick like Overpass, I guess, but it's just not. I don't know.
Yeah, I would think that would be the natural one for them.
But even then, it's like it's still just a tough matchup.
Yeah.
Like map pool wise for them too. They don't have like a clear cut, like this is a free map win versus us.
Right.
When you're in that kind of situation, like you said, you had a similar, it's kind of similar for you with Spirit for your own matchup. Like, is that something you have to work to remedy long term, or do you just kind of like say that, okay, this team is one that we're matched up poor against and there's not much we can do? Like, how do you work to kind of like remedy that in the long term if you have a poor matchup stylistically versus the team?
I think it just comes with like your experience with as a team together. Like we're still like a fairly new team regarding like me and YEKINDAR joining, and there's still a lot more we can add and get more comfortable with. Like we definitely have our comfort zones as well, right? So it's like that's where if we have to go out of our comfort zones and focus on like a specific game plan for a team that maybe we're not used to running as much, then like certain players in the team are not going to be as comfortable because we're not going to be in those situations very often. And that's where, like, you know, even in the heroic matchup, you know, we'll have specific game plans for them because, you know, they play a certain way on some maps where, you know, our normal game isn't going to be as good versus them. So we have to play in a different way to an extent, even if it's like small changes, and that will in turn put certain players in situations where they're not used to it as often, and that just comes with like time and experience together, which is why a team like Cloud9 is so good, is they've just been together for so long at this point where there's not too many teams where I think they match up poorly against, and I think we're just sort of like an anomaly for them in terms of like specifically a bad matchup for them.
Yeah, and if, you know, if they want to target that, like you were saying with the Spirit example, it's like you have to reinvent stuff, and maybe that reinvention like carries over to some of your other matchups and makes you match up worse against other teams, right? So it's
exactly,
like this
yeah.
secret
Then they start
cost-benefit
moving away from their
analysis.
normal game, and then
Yeah.
so it's tricky.
Right. And I think that's just what happens. If, like you said, it's a strength of theirs that they've been together for so long, but maybe then they become calcified in that style. And if they, you know,
Yeah,
like that's what makes them
exactly.
good, but also what makes them exploitable if you can get enough familiarity with it, right?
That's a hard thing for some teams too. Is, you know, maybe they're at that point where they can win an event, but it's not going to be every event. You know,
Right.
they could win it like one event a year and then get top 4 at most events, but it's like, at what point do you make a roster change? At what point is it the system, not the play? Like, you know, it's hard to really find that extra like couple percent at some point to really put you over the edge and have like some sort of era, or, you know, at least be making finals every event, especially with how good everyone is right now.
Pretty
So-
often when we see a team reinvent themselves like that, it's usually between one of the breaks, like, or like after one of the breaks, essentially. Is that kind of like, is that extended period of time kind of just like, I don't know, is it like the when you have to make that substantial of a change and you're coming in fresh into the next season of the circuit, essentially, like, is that, do you find like that's the best time to do it in general, even though like you have now, like, before, when you, if you would do that kind of thing after a break, you would have like 4 LAN events like within the first month and a half or something. Now you have like 2 very important events, which is like blast groups and EPL, usually right after the breaks. Like, is it hard to kind of reinvent yourself and then go into those kind of tournaments straight away?
I definitely say the schedule is pretty dog shit. Like, you have to either sacrifice your own mental health and like own personal life if you want to like completely reinvent yourself during the break, because at most teams are probably going to do a week boot camp or like start playing a week before blast groups, and you're not going to see too much crazy stuff within a week. And, you know, a lot of teams, some teams maybe scrim even less before that, and they just use blast groups as like a sort of a testing period, and you know, they're fine with playing the showdown potentially. It just depends on the team. But I'd say that after the first month of next year, I'd say it actually gets easier. Like, I think there's more time to reinvent yourself after that first month of like kind of it being sloppy a bit. But yeah, it depends. Like, some teams that are maybe not near the top will take an extra 2 weeks to practice during the player break because they have to, and they want that extra edge. Like, even a team like who's a partner team that's not doing so well. Like,
I mean, OG, but they qualified for the world final. Like, I guess like a second question kind of tied into this is like, with the whole format for qualifying for the world final, like, do you think having these teams make like a lot of teams making changes heading into the break and then having like so many points come from the blast groups, allowing teams like OG to qualify for the world final, is that an issue as well? Not to tie in like a second question into this, but I'm kind of wondering that at the same time.
I think it's definitely an issue. I don't think it's. I mean, the schedule for CS has always been bad. Even like when I was on Energy in 2018, like we were going to an event every week pretty
Yeah.
much, and you're
Yeah.
just pretty much relying on like individual performance at a certain point because you can't really like change anything or add anything crazy. You can maybe add like a strat here or there, just like for a specific matchup, but it's not like it's definitely not. You're not going to get the best CS like out of a player break ever with how the current schedule is. Like you would need like 2 weeks after the player break's over for like people to truly boot camp and practice, and then you have 2 weeks. Everyone's like got new shit. They're all practiced up, and you have like a really good event offer it.
So
What
so
is
would
how
you
it should be.
so like with for example like the major, a lot of the partner teams that we saw have success kind of fell off pretty hard. Like would you and then we also had a few teams that came up that really, I mean, they're not partner teams in everything. Like just looking at the like the Rio results, we had of the top 8 teams, like Outsiders obviously not a partner team. Maus aren't Blast partners, but they're ESL partners. Furia kind of same deal. Cloud9, they're actually not partners with anybody. Fnatic, same deal where it's just
They're
Pro
partners
League.
with Flashpoint.
Yeah, okay. All right, they're Flashpoint partners. That's going real well for them.
Is that
But then,
actually true? Can you even say that anymore?
It's
no,
true.
no, I mean,
You
yeah,
can't.
they are. They technically are, and but it's not to any. There's no benefit to that.
I think
but
the
it-
rug
but it does
pull's already
exist.
happened on that one, boys. That's
Well, I guess for Daps, for like the big events like this, do you think that, say, Outsiders, Cloud9 to an extent, Spirit to an extent, do you think some of these teams had in any way an advantage because they weren't playing at everything right before this? So in a sense they had more time to like boot camp or practice.
I think for Outsiders specifically, I think they would have done well regardless.
Okay.
Personally, I think they have one of the best systems currently, and they have good players that are performing well. For the other teams, I this has been a thing that's always happened in my opinion though. Like it happened when I was playing still too. Like we were going, like if you're a team that's invited to everything back in like 2018, 2019, you were going to every event, and then there's teams like Ghost Gaming or like these random teams who are like they have decent players who can shoot back, and they're just sitting there for 2 months watching you, and then you go and play them at Pro League, and you just came off like 3 months in a row traveling, going to all these events, showing literally every inch of your game to these teams,
Yeah.
and you have no clue how they play, and even though you have better players on paper, the other players aren't bad. Like they're there for a reason and they can shoot back. And if they know every inch of your game and you've no clue about them, then yeah, there isn't an inherent advantage in that for sure.
Let's. I want to hear actually your opinion on Outsiders a little bit, because you do say that they have one of the best systems out there. So, first of all, do you think there's a team with a better system than them?
Better system. Fuck.
Okay, maybe let's just move. Let's just talk about them. Why do you think their system is so good? Because I think the James calling style is one of the best in the world right now. It might be the best actually, but why do you think that's
I
the
think
case, that it's up there?
I think without going into like specific strategies and stuff, it's a huge part of like their discipline that they like sort of like you see it in their like these are newer players too. Like these are guys who like some of them it was their first major, right? Or
Yep.
Yes.
so it's like these are guys who you would not expect this level of like discipline and patience coming out of them at like this level of their career. So it's like clearly you know, the coaching I'm sure Dustin has a huge impact on like the discipline that comes from that. um I've heard good things about James too in terms of like he gets his point across of like what he expects. So it's like their overall structure, and this is something they've been building for a long time, right? I think James been it's like 5 years in the making, like
At least four.
it-
At least four is calling. Yeah, or 20.
like
Yeah.
kicker Dustin and James, I think,
they've
have
been
been
together
there
for
for
quite a
a
few years.
long time. So
Yeah.
like they have like a core there, and they've been building a system for a long time, and it's showing like its strength now. And like even like people meme about the saving and stuff, but saving is super important on T side especially, where like you know you see how many times like one gun can just win you the round if you put it in the right hands of somebody, or you have like a plan around it.
Yep.
So it's like their discipline, understanding when to save and like cut their losses, and then focusing on like the next round is just those are like two big elements of their system that I think a lot of teams like overlook personally. I think there's a lot of teams that go for these unwinnable rounds like 2v4s and it's 2v4s with 30 seconds left, and like even three going down. Like I saw around the major where Outsiders went down 3v5 on Ancient at like a minute 30, and they just saved instantly. And it's like, yeah, it's hard enough to win around 5v5 on T side Ancient, let alone 3v5.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like they understand like what they're trying to accomplish, and I think the discipline in like the younger players that they've instilled is super important, like to have them at that level already.
Yeah, well, the obvious joke being James. You talked earlier. You didn't want to reveal any trade secrets. James revealed them all recently. He obviously just gets a good, little dance in his bed before he plays a game, and he's good to go, right? So,
Oh my
that's
God.
I think every other IGL just needs to adopt that, and I think we'll already be
Sure.
golden, so.
How much are you trying to adopt any of that stuff into your game? Because I did notice that like you do like occasionally more than I saw before. You do get like a hero AK on some rounds and like chuck it in YEKINDAR or ELiGE's hands, and you did used to do it before, but like not to the same amount that you do it now. Not that it's super often, but like how are you trying to adopt like some of those aspects that YEKINDAR's trying to bring in or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that part's even just YEKINDAR. It's sort of just like playing the percentages. Like one
Right.
rifle increases your percentage of winning the round by a lot more than people would actually think. And even like hero M4s on CT side, like you can run around the map and just like set this guy up constantly. You can just go around getting kills, and then you're just like stuffing them on the other side of the map. And then the M4, it's time to rotate, reposition. You're just constantly like messing with the other team. And I think even Heroic does that. Like you see this more and more where like one gun can literally just win you the round if you play it correctly. And that's like the value of saving or even forcing into those rounds at times. Even like the percentage of force buying with the Galil is huge.
Yep.
Compared to like what people actually think. The Galil's actually a lot better of a gun than people give it credit for. As long as you're like hitting the first shot, which most people can do at this point with how good everyone is. So we've definitely been focusing more on like the economy side of things and trying to like figure out what's best for us in terms of that.
Do you think there's any like I think so oftentimes like narratives go around like X player, like I'll just use NaVi for example. Like people say like Bit is having a bad time lately and people are kind of like pinning blame on him. But how much do you think of that as like the system is failing Bit now because like they don't have an IGL anymore? Like Electronic's trying, but like it's clearly like they've lost a step right there. So like
CY also took some of his positions, I think. Like the old position he played in, no?
Maybe like one, like maybe
Okay.
T side, but not CT. He's playing most of his stuff.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like,
not on CT.
Yeah, so I think so often like the narrative gets really conflated with like individuals doing bad, so we blame the individual, but it's like, but the calling is I think failing somebody like Bit right now really heavily. But I guess do you think it's any coincidence that like the three highest ranked teams in the world right now, Arcadian led, James led, and Kerrigan led, like it just seems like they're the best three in-game leaders out there, no doubt about it. Navi's ranked fourth, but they have the best player in the world, and that makes up for it in some regards. So like, do you think like IGL or captain or like leadership or system is the most important thing overall, or how much do you think comes down to individuals versus system?
System's definitely huge because the system determines like kind of what the individuals can do and what they can't do. If I was to speculate on Navi specifically, like I know they're like one of the few teams that has like, I'm pretty sure it's like all their strats printed out on every page, and then Blade will call a pause and like tell them to turn. Like James kind of like said how he thinks like that should be banned or whatever, and I actually agree with James. I think I don't know like if it is like all their strats, I guess it's just like they can't remember their strats or whatever. But like I think it does remove an element kind of from like the IGL's importance. Like I never had that through my whole career, and like if someone did forget something, I would just tell them like, "Yo, okay, do this," or I'd be like, "Can you please ask if you are not sure of what I'm telling you to do?" And I would just tell them what to do. So I'm not too sure what like Navi's system is, to be honest. It's kind of like strange to me when I see them like alterning the pages. And like Blade only has 4 pauses, right? So like what happens if you get lost in the game? And then if Blade is calling a lot of stuff, it's like that. Like in our ancient game at the major, they used all 4 pauses, and I'm just like, I'm not gonna take any more pauses. Like now
Yeah.
you just gotta leave them out to dry at this point. Like
It's also
does
like really specific on those pages. Like the one time where there's a clear enough picture of it and somebody translated it. Like some of them were very, very specific rounds that were broken down.
Yeah, it's not just
Yeah.
like, here's the default that is slightly different or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like this guy goes here at this time and throws this grenade or whatever. You know what I mean?
Like
It's very specific.
like we had that at the start of the team. Like when we had everything new, like I would print off all our strats, and then we would have like the sheets, like at Cologne especially, because we hadn't been together very long. But it's at the point now where it's like if you're not remembering our shit, then like you need to, as an individual, put more time in and
Yep.
read the fucking pages we have before the game, and like make sure you know our strats and our system at this point.
Yeah.
So
of
y-
course.
my opinion on that, like I kind of like spitballed a bit. My opinion on it is just like I agree with James, and I think the IGL's importance is like paramount, and 100% it's like the system matters the most, and I think the IGL in the game should be the one calling it.
Yeah. No, this is going to sound weird to say because we're talking about professional teams at the highest echelon, but I think it's also kind of a noob trap to do what Navi's doing because, like, okay, for one, Blade is probably an anomaly just as a coach anyway in terms of how his tactical mind. So whatever you're putting on the page, if you're not Navi, is probably not even going to be as useful potentially. But also even for Navi, like, and we've seen this, I think, is they can get lost if they don't have the ability to pause anymore. They can sort of not really know what to do because the specific like order of which strat to call might not have been laid out, or maybe that order is clearly broken or not worked or something. And so, you can script the game, so to speak, which is something that Blade seems to want to do. And he was actually criticized for doing this. I think, we assumed it was his doing, that Navi felt a little bit more scripted in the past. And now maybe he's found enough little gears to turn and levers to pull that make it a little bit more complicated and harder to read, especially at their heyday when they won Stockholm, right? And so, maybe you can argue that it can work because we've seen it work in the past, but I just feel like if you don't have somebody who can like actually focus on intaking all of that information, which is essentially what Boomich's role seems to have been, then I do feel like you certainly could get very, very fragile very quickly.
Yeah,
some
well,
of these games.
like to defend Blade, he's doing the correct thing if he had to do it. Like if I
Okay.
joined Liquid and
Right.
there wasn't really a strong IGL and no one really had an opinion, then like I was an IGL my whole career. Of course, I'm going to create the whole system
Yep.
and bring everything I have and take things from good teams and show them everything. So it's like if Blade joined Na'Vi and there's no IGL really, no one really wants to call. I don't remember what the roster was when he first joined Na'Vi, but
I think it was
it's
still Zeus and Boomich coming in to learn from Zeus or whatever. But yeah, I mean, either way, like Boomich was
Yeah,
often
so-
thought of as not a true IGL anyway, right?
yeah, and I don't like I assume Electronic's good at mid rounding and like understands the game and everything, but
Yeah.
I don't know if Electronic's like I'm gonna build a whole system type guy and impart my vision on like everybody. Like I don't know if he is that type of guy. So Blade is in a scenario where like he kind of has to do it because that's what he did his whole career.
Okay, I want to get your opinion. Actually, okay, so you just played Navi actually. So when you play against them, how does this, like what you're saying, transpire in the server? Does it feel like there's like a lack of system, or does it feel any particular
Like
way?
how different does it feel to how they played before? Almost. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, they could be a
compared to
talking
like
point.
what roster though.
Well, like the
When
one
I
with Boomich.
played.
Yeah.
Or,
Oh well. I guess actually, did you even play against the?
no, I played versus Zeus Edward Navi.
Oh, okay, well then
Yeah.
that's
right.
Two different
that's
probably.
kind of.
But yeah, just how does it
Yeah.
feel, right? Like when you're going up against them, you said earlier, oh yeah, just don't take any pauses. Because so something you said, I don't think it was on the pod, it was before, is that one of the things that you try to do is like make it so that the team can operate without needing that much of a coach's involvement. And that seems to be like completely opposite to Navi's philosophy, right? So like, how do you feel like you guys match up well based on that? How does it feel to go up against them?
Yeah, like I mean, like I said before, I don't know if that's a philosophy that Navi like wants to have. I think it's just sort of the situation they're in, where like they have to do it at that point. In terms of how it feels, I mean, I wasn't there for like the Boombridge Navi. Like I
Well, just
wasn't.
if you
I
want to
was like, yeah.
if you want to even just remark on the fact that when you beat him at the Blast Fall finals recently, like you guys kind of shit on them on the T side. Like, why do you think that was so achievable?
I don't know if it's necessarily their system. I think it's more so their environment at the moment. Like they're
Hmm.
clearly a team that's going through shit and they're clearly making a roster change. So I I think it's disingenuous to like judge their system based on
Okay.
like the current team environment personally.
How
But
about if you don't want to
yeah.
judge them, how about Judge G2? How about
There we
that?
go.
Because you guys played them recently, and you guys play, and YEKINDAR even made that statement about like it felt like they didn't do too much different. I mean, like I think NiKo responded in his own interview something along the lines of like, "Well, I think we did change some things. Maybe they just didn't notice or whatever." But like I think G2 is one of those teams where you look at them on paper and like this is a team that almost like it almost feels like it doesn't matter what system Hooksy puts together. It should just work when you have Hunter, NiKo, Monacy, and yet they keep doing very poorly. I would say, like, I mean, not qualifying for the RMR. The best thing that they ever did was like they went 5-0 in that in the EPL groups or whatever. But basically, what do you think right now is hindering G2 so much? Since you guys just played against them, and I would say like Vertigo, yeah, you did quite well against them. I felt like probably overall like that was a game plan thing. But then, you know, you had a close Mirage against them too. But I mean, does it feel like this team with Hooksy at the helm is doing some things wrong?
My personal opinion of just like the gut feeling I have. Again, I don't know anything about their team in terms of like
Sure.
the internal structure, but like the one coach that quit or like got fired, the
Xtaz, yeah.
Xtaz guy. Yeah, like he kind of said that he couldn't impart his vision. Like he wanted to have control pretty much is what I remember reading. And then NiKo's obviously very opinionated, a native, I assume. And then Hooksy is the IGL. So it's like it seems like they're a team that is lacking following one vision. I feel it's just sort of like the feeling I get, and I don't know if that's like who's the cause of that, whether it's like NiKo or Hooksy or I think even they said they had troubles with like the reason Alexi B got cut. I think was because there's like disagreements between like how to play between like the coach and him. And like the truth is you just my opinion has always been if you're gonna pick up an IGL, you listen to the fucking IGL. Like I don't know why the coach on G2 before would cut Alexi B for not listening to him. It's like, bro, you fucking picked him up to be the IGL. Let
Okay.
him fucking call, bro. Like if I was Alexi B and then I get picked up and then the coach is like trying to come into my system it's like sure, try and make what I want better, but like don't fucking come and mess with my shit. Like let me fucking call, man. It's my job. So I don't know if that's actually what was happening over there, but if you're gonna pick an IGL, you let the IGL fucking call, and if you don't like how he calls, you cut him. That's how it should be, in my opinion.
Okay. I'll put out a statement you don't have to even comment on. I do think that it's like we've now seen enough evidence that calling with NiKo on your team is really fucking hard. Like I think it's just like a problem area for a lot of people, and you don't want to if you don't want to say anything because you're his direct competitor, that's fine. But like I think
Yeah,
like at this point with Kerrigan being the one that's like it's always like it's him or it's me with NiKo, and that's kind of the case for the last 3-4 years, even going back to like the phase lineup with Kerrigan and everything. And even though they had some I mean, some NiKo lineups have had okay success with like other people like winning some S tier tournaments here and there, but like not achieving their huge goal, which is like being a consistent number one and winning a major. Really, I think that's the biggest thing
yeah,
for him. Yeah. So
Well, listen, I just wanted to
yeah,
say that NiKo
yeah.
is definitely a bit of an enigma, right? We have no real idea how much of an involvement he has. We can speculate, but I just feel like on a human level, because as you grow, like as you get older, you're getting wiser in theory. Like we all want to believe that like as reasonable people, you're not just going to assume he stays stagnant the whole way through with this. So surely after NIP make the major with Alexi B at the helm, after G2 gets, they cut them, and then they go through past them in this very event, the fall finals. It's like, come on, man. Like, you gotta at some point realize there's no shot that like we made the right decision, because this is yet another IGL finding success in a post NiKo world, right? On a roster that doesn't have him. And it's just like, okay, to be fair, I don't think Hooksy is going to have the same level of success, although that would be really insane if he like gets cut and then goes to another team and then does better than G2. That would just be.
I mean,
like,
Copenhagen Flames did do better.
They did do better before,
like better before.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And
Do you feel like?
Go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off.
No.
Do you feel like it's NiKo's personality per se and like the pressure he brings to these players, or do you feel like he actually wants his vision imparted on the team?
I don't even think he needs I don't even know if he necessarily has a very specific vision in terms of like an overall system. He did call for a while, but so I mean I'm sure that he has some idea of how he wants to play, but I think it's more of like the pressure that he brings, and like it's like when you have NiKo on your team, it feels like you have a god tier rifler, but you also kind of have to cater to him in some ways. And he's not like for example, other really top tier riflers right now. Like I think Axile is a lot more like malleable. Like you could probably throw him into some situations and he's just gonna do it. And NiKo, it's kind of like if it's not the situation he wants, then he doesn't really want to do it. And I think there's like more pushback in that regard. Like, so I think, so he's probably hard to work with in that sense. But like when Alexi B said that thing before also about G2, where he's like, the thing with NiKo and Hunter is like, you don't really need to micro them. It's kind of like, yeah, but like maybe sometimes you should, because sometimes you have an idea about how you want the round to go. Not maybe live round, but like you do have like specific ways you want to move through a map and protocols that you want to like you go through to find consistency. But sometimes with NiKo, like he will
I have a take.
Here we go.
Yeah.
And like there's a lot of evidence for this, and just like players who are at the top and then fall off. I think it's more so being stuck in the past. And I can like personally for me, when I created that energy team with like Ethan and cerq and Brehze, it was very easy for me to bring my system, because they were all inexperienced. They didn't have much of an opinion, and I could like mold them into what I wanted them. Whereas when I picked up cerq on energy, while cerq has benefits because he's experienced, won a major, all that, it's harder for me to like get my point across to him because he won tournaments playing a certain way. So it's going to be instilled in his head, no matter what, that there's things that he can take away from those teams that he must do. And I think that's something that happens to a lot of players. Like you could even say for Cold, where like maybe there's a lack of innovation or a lack of change of mindset. And even like in the interview NiKo did about our team, I think he said something along the lines of like, we take a lot of risks, right? It's like most of the things we do are not risky at all. They're actually planned, and there's a reason why we do all of them. So even him saying that is incorrect. Like if you actually watched our game and like the things we do, everything is set. There's no like just random pushes we do where it's like completely just bullshit, like huge gamble. Like we take calculated risks, and there's reasons for why we do everything.
That is like the ultimate ego players saying, though, is like, oh, they beat us because they just did this random shit.
Yeah, that is actually...
That's like something that he would say about like a Vega squadron. You know what I mean? Like if some team beat him in a way that is high variance, he'd be like, yeah, well, obviously you play that match back and we win 2-0, which is what he said here, right? So.
Even if it's not high variance, he just thinks that he got shitter lucked, which is obviously not really the case.
Yeah. So. I don't know, it kind of belies what you were saying, Maui, is that maybe he doesn't have a clear vision of the game in that sense, or a vision of a system that might be imparted, because if he can't read that, if he can't recognize that there's actually a system in place leading to these victories of a team that is playing against him, and now he has to like think about how to respond to that. Because the other thing is, it's not just an ego thing, but it also absolves you of any responsibility to adapt. Like if I think that this guy just jumping 1-digged me over a half wall like Config in that famous clip in like 2018 or whatever, I don't know why that came to mind, but like that, if that's what's gonna go into my head, I'm like, oh yeah, that wouldn't happen again, so I don't have to change anything. Like that is like a logical conclusion to take. So it feels like maybe there's a little bit of like ego self-defense here. It's like, well, I don't have to change anything. This is all good. We just have to play again.
There's probably a lot of other players you could probably bring up where it's like mechanically they're still insane.
Yeah.
But maybe they've been lost in the you could go on HLTV and probably go through like maybe there's some like tier 1 players that used to be tier 1 where they're on tier 2 teams now, tier 3 teams where it's not that their mechanical ability is gone, it's that they're winning tournaments does do something to you, and if you can't keep an open mind, then you're going to slowly become more closed-minded because like you're going to keep thinking of the past of like, yeah, we won a tournament with this is what I've even had troubles with this too. Like I thought everything we did on energy was good because it's the most success I had in my career playing, but
Right.
there's a lot of different ways to look at the game, and you can win with different environments. You don't have to all be friends, but even like there's so many variables, and you have to always keep an open mind, or else you're going to slowly fall into irrelevancy. I feel because you're just not. Yeah, you're just going to keep like becoming worse and worse for you.
It also speaks to your point that like a few of the teams that are coming into the top 10 are like teams that have a lot of younger players surrounded by someone with more experience as well, who's like, for example, like you have Heroic being led by Acadian, you have Outsiders, you also have Spirit who like keep cycling in young talent and doing well with them. You have Maus with like the 3 academy players. It's just like it kind of really does speak to that point where you have like the malleability of the younger players that can actually be led by a player. Yeah.
And I think that's what makes a great team. Is just like you have one vision, you have a person who can impart that vision and idea to everybody, and you have people who will listen and believe in that system. And I think that's something we have, even though we have a lot of experienced players who, we do have some faults on our team and some weaknesses in our team where people have their comfort zones for obvious reasons. We have players who've been playing for like over 10 years now at this point. So of course they're going to have comfort zones. And we're working after every event to try and like remove those comfort zones and try and make sure that we're not falling into these like traps for ourselves.
At the risk of laboring the NiKo point real quick, I did want to say that he actually hasn't had that much success. Like the success that he has had, like the last tournament he won was an online event. It was the IEM New York, Europe, because what are locations during lockdowns? And then before that, it was a lot of stuff with FaZe, maybe a little bit of success with some of the other rosters. So it's like, those are all with different IGLs, different rosters, right? That's with like Kerrigan at the helm back in like the 2017, 2018 days, right? It's like, there's a long distance. And I guess to your point, Daps, you were saying that when Tarek came in, it's like, he hadn't, just won the major, right? He had won the major some time ago. It wasn't that much of a gap compared to where NiKo is at now, but it's like, it's maybe kind of similar, right? It's like he's still maybe in the past. What do you think, like from your experience with that?
Yeah, like at least in that specific example, like one of the things was I remember arguments like Tarek, Chet, and I would have, and not every time, but a lot of the time, Tarek would bring up like Cloud9 winning the major, or like we used to play like this, we used to do that, and I remember I would literally go back and watch how they won the major, and like wouldn't line up with what he was saying.
Okay,
and it was just like that was again, Tarek was a good pickup. Like even though it ended up in me getting cut, obviously, it was still the correct pickup to pick him up, and it gave us the best chance to win or potentially win the events we had a chance to, because he is a good player and like understands how to like mid round and the correct play in certain scenarios. But the negative of picking him up was it did kind of ruin the vision of the team, was because even with Stanislaw, he had success with Stanislaw, right? He didn't win a tournament with me, he won a tournament with him. And regardless of if Stan was the correct pickup or not for the longevity of the team, he's going to his comforts of like, I won a major playing with Cloud9 and how we played in that system, and then I also won a tournament with Stan. So of course, in Tarek's brain, he's just like, you know what, we're getting top 4 every event, let's go to the comfort zone of like, I won with this person. He's not really thinking long term necessarily. He's just thinking sort of like what worked for him in the past. And I think that's a trap that not only him, but a lot of players fall into is, it could be more in game, out of game. People want to play with players they usually won stuff with generally or had success with. And then in game, it's the same thing. They want to play a certain style, a certain position. And I think those are like mental gymnastics that a lot of players have to work through, and the ones who have long careers are the ones who are able to adapt and avoid those sort of like hindrances. I think.
When you say what Tarek said didn't line up, do you mean that like what he was saying wouldn't line up in the way teams currently play or like played at that time, or do you mean what he said as to how they won rounds at the major didn't line up with what you watched when you watched the demo?
I think the one example I remember was like, I think I remember him saying like how they just defaulted every round, and then I watched like some of the matches and they like didn't default at all. Like I think it was like like the final Dust 2 game in the major. I think they like fast catted like half the rounds or some shit. That was a long time ago, so
Sure,
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact arguments, but it's just like Tarek. In short, Tarek had the way he wanted to play, I had the way I wanted to play, and then Chet kind of created the system that I made originally with me. So we had like a very structured system to an extent that like helped get the most out of like cerq and Brehze. And I think over time, as like I got removed and then Chet got removed, you started to see that system disappear and it became something new. And I think that's where, you know, whatever team was before disappeared at a certain point.
About really quick, I didn't actually even want to get into this, but I think now that you brought it up so accurately or so close to home, it's just like with Breeze and cerq, they're obviously not. I mean, Breeze is doing okay actually, but I don't think cerq is like showing anything similar to what we saw of him when he was playing under you. If there were like one thing that you would just say to like tweak these EG teams to like make cerq or Breeze activate again, what would it be?
I wouldn't put it on one thing. Like
Okay, well, yeah, how would you do it?
the difference is that when we weren't like winning tier 1 tournaments, but we were getting top 4 at every tier 1 tournament at one point. Like we were pretty consistent and could win if we found like that final 5%, but the final 5% was probably me killing shit. But I'd say like the things that help them the most was, you know, we had a very like family environment. Like I'd say out of all the teams I've ever been in, we were like very close. Like we would always have fun hanging out outside of the game. We weren't one of those teams that just ends practice and like leaves the room. Like we'd always stay together like all the time. So like we had a very, very, very good environment, which also made everyone more relaxed. And like there was definitely less pressure when we'd play events. And then Chet and I also created a very good system for the team where, you know, it just like was structured and everyone knew what everyone was doing. And, you know, we had some communication issues, but other than that, it was just overall a very good system and team environment, which I think helped everyone in the team play very well. And not even just very well, but we were very consistent, I feel. But again, we were missing that like extra 5% to actually like win events consistently.
Okay. How about we get into? So I'm sure you've taken a little bit of a look at these things, so we can talk about some other changes that have been happening. So obviously the recent update moved in Anubis. It changed the A1S. It changed the op a little bit. Uh, Actually, I want to kind of start from something I don't think is that important, but I would actually want to hear if you have a differing take on it. Is the op, the 5 bullets? Like, is this gonna matter?
It's gonna matter a little bit, but
Like,
I don't think it's.
like 1 round a half, maybe it'll matter, or or you think even less than that?
I think it's more so for like. I think the biggest negative is now like it's info that the op has to give to reload is
Okay.
something that I haven't thought about it too deeply, but I think that's one thing that comes to mind just off the top of my head is, you know, if you're like window on Mirage and you like take a few pot shots or like whatever, you have to reload now, and now it's like you're reloading outside window, they know where you are, rather than if you just like could reposition instantly. Like I think that's potentially,
Oh,
but
and
like
also you have to have the gun out, so you would you would move slower between rotations. I would assume
yeah.
that's
Uh,
slightly okay.
I don't think it's like a huge deal though. Like, there's not too many scenarios where I think an opera's gonna miss 5 shots and then like have to reload. And you
Yeah.
like hopefully they hit like 2 out of 5 and like get the kills they need to, anyways.
Yeah.
So
Okay, let's move on from that one then. So, so you said before this that before we started this recording that you've taken a look at Anubis. How do you think this is going to play out, or like what kind of opinions do you have on the map right now?
I think it's a unique map. I think it's pretty good. It's I've been doing some flyovers of it today, and it's kind of like that sort of A. So I think it's A. Let me see. Yeah, I think it's like towards the A middle, like that water area.
Yep.
Mhm.
Is sort of like a point of contention for the CTs potentially, but it's so tricky of a map because like mid's gonna get stuffed every round, like on the bridge, and then B will get stuffed every round. So CTs are gonna have to like flash check a lot, I think, and just like try and like contest things because I think it's wrong if you are the CTs on the map and you just play passive. Personally,
Yep.
I think it's like way too easy to execute on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we can just
Okay,
start it
We're
up
back.
again if you want to
We're
count them
back.
in.
Yeah. No, we're just good. You were saying,
Oh, okay.
so you were saying it's really hard to flash or you're gonna have to like flash check
It-
stuff. You don't want to be passive on the CT side.
Well, because I watched there's 2 Anubis matches on HLTV. I watched the ATK MIBR, didn't really learn too much, and then I watched the Webster's Sandgall game. I think was the second one, and that Webster team was just sort of doing like a 1-1-3 constantly.
Yeah.
Like they're doing like one bridge, one outside B, I think it is, and then they were doing like the box guy would run up and like molly that E box and like try and take control of that area. So I think you're gonna see CTs like contesting that like outside A area a lot more. Like when the map finds like sort of a meta, in my opinion. But it's just tricky because like new maps are you're gonna see like a lot of sloppy games where like some team
yeah.
has some new shit and like no one has any protocols for it, and then it's you're just gonna lose because like you have no clue how to react to it, and then eventually like when the meta gets created, then you'll see like some cleaner games. But
Yeah.
that's like preliminarily, that's kind of how I see the map being played. It's just like CTs or Ts are probably gonna try and contest what that Webster team is contesting, is like trying to like pressure like B splits, and then you can just like work into something mid round, like go mid, like up the bridge late, or you can even boost into that bridge too. So you
Yeah,
can do some
so
like weird
as
shit on the
Simple
map.
showed in the show match, although it took him like 5 times, and by the time it was done, the whole round was over. But you know.
Yeah.
There is actually a similar. So, like for people who don't know, there was this humorous big tweet where when Dust 2 was taken out and the op was nerfed. There's, I think it was Tabson who's like, "What the fuck? We suck now," or something. This will destroy us, something like that. What people probably don't remember is that there was this blast, or maybe it wasn't blast. I think it was some Betway battle of Betway thing that I
casted that with Gobby.
I was
going
gonna
to
say, I'm pretty sure Maui was involved in that, and Anubis was played, and NIP 16 for him or something. So I think that was also in the back of his mind. He was like, we had no idea exactly what Daps was saying. Like if you know anything and the other team doesn't know that, then they're so hard to adapt on the fly for like a brand new map, right? And that's going to be one of the most eye-catching things about watching it. So, and to your point also about mid, I think that beacon area that looks out into the water from the like behind the drop, so to speak, is that is basically going to be like Mirage mid window. You're just going to smoke it every round as a T because you need to take that control in the first place. And I think you've already seen teams start to do that even on the 2 matches that have already been played, right? So
for like quick take opinions on the map, where do you think this map will rank like later on? I just want to hear your prediction on this. Like, I mean, I don't know what you think the worst maps are, but like a lot of us just say Vertigo and Ancient right now. Do you think it's better than those 2?
In terms of creativity, of course. I mean, Ancient's a map where you can't really do too much anymore. Personally, like maybe I'm wrong and some genius person creates some crazy shit on Ancient, but I just don't really see Ancient being innovated too much. Like, and Vertigo, I mean, Vertigo's just awful map.
Yeah.
Just an awful map.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Agreed. Oh wait. Oh no, you're muted. No, you're muted.
Are you actually glad that I'm gonna guess that you're not happy that Dust 2 got removed then out of those three for this map then?
I mean, Vertigo should be removed over Dust 2, but I mean, I think Dust 2 is also a very boring map and like
Yeah.
pretty stale as well. So I mean, I don't think Dust 2 is a bad removal. I just think they should have removed two maps at the same time. Personally,
Yes,
like,
my
Yes.
man.
like let's like blow it up a little bit here. Like, get,
Especially
like,
when you have a break for people to actually put time in.
Yeah.
yeah.
It'd
Also,
been really
maybe,
cool to see.
you know what probably would have happened if there was a second map removed is probably Abu Dhabi doesn't play on that patch because it's such a short notice. I was surprised they even played on it, like despite the
I
fact
mean, yeah,
that,
I don't know why they're. I don't even know why
Yeah.
they're playing on it now. Like, it's
Well,
just.
yeah, it doesn't
I
even
think-
make
I
sense.
mean, I guess
it doesn't
it's
make
good for
sense.
heroic, but
Yeah.
it fucks a lot of other teams.
It also probably helps their viewership though, because since it's
I'm
the last
sure.
event of the year,
Yeah.
people are going to be like, "Oh, we want to see what the new patch looks like. Want to see what the new map looks like." Like, I'm sure it'll draw more viewers as well in
It's
general.
just, it doesn't make any
I
sense
also
because the fall
assumed-
final. The world final. It's like at the end of the segment of the whole season. It's like, dude, look, check it out. We're coming to a close with the whole year, right? The last big event in the calendar. By the way, it's a completely different meta.
Yeah,
Like,
so
okay,
I did think that too initially, but like at the same time, if this patch had been released in the middle of the year or like 3 months ago, it would like it's not like we would just be like, nope, this was how the year was. We have to play out like with the rest of the
Well, I
original
think-
patch, right? Like it's just yes,
I mean,
it's
my-
at the end, but even then, like it's
Well, the
still
difference is
long
3
enough for it
months.
to be implemented.
The difference is,
I guess,
you
but
get
like
3
teams are
months of
still,
play.
but teams are still scrimming with the new M4. They're still scrimming. Like it,
Oh,
it
okay.
doesn't make sense to like
that's
I
the
hold
thing,
think
out
there
the
long.
should have been a
streaming.
compromise. Personally, I think they should have done new patch but kept Dust 2 as a
Yeah,
map.
that would
personally.
have been
Yeah.
what I
Oh,
would have done.
Yeah,
That'd be-
that would have been okay.
Like
That'd be
it
interesting. Yeah.
it doesn't make like for viewership, sure. Like having Anubis in the tournament will definitely those matches will draw a lot of viewers
Yeah.
for like the first like tier 1
Mhm.
Anubis games, but
Yes.
outside of that, in terms of like the competitive integrity of the event, it's like some teams will gain a lot from Dust 2 being removed and some will not. Some will it's a huge negative for them.
Yeah.
Is like, I mean, Big's not at the world final, but like there's teams that rely on Dust 2 to some extent, and those teams get completely fucked. Whereas like Heroic, their permaban just got removed, so like they're fucking chilling right now, and they just won an event, so like they're in a
Yeah.
good spot for this event.
They could just
for
ban
sure.
Anubis. They could just ban Anubis throughout
Exactly,
the whole
yeah.
thing, and they're going to
then
be
they have
fine.
all
They're
their
just gonna have
maps,
full-
like
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then they could even sneakily play Anubis, and then just like Cadian likes to do that shit in vetoes. Like
Yeah.
he's picked his permaban versus me before when I was playing. So like, for all you know, they're just gonna secretly prep Anubis for like one match and then just fuck a team. So it just gives like Heroic a huge advantage in terms of like veto, at least.
I will say
Okay,
it'll
we-
be nice to see Anubis at an event like this and not one where you have like I don't know, a top 30 team like picking it into a top 5
Yeah,
team.
right.
It's just like I hate seeing like top teams float maps that they haven't played against like very big underdogs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So it'll be nice to see like a little bit more even ground almost.
every team falls into that trap at some
Yeah.
point.
Okay, I want to the one other change that I think is probably I think most of us are like as fans of watching are relieved is that the A1S got nerfed, and I've already started seeing some stuff like from just like the lower tier games that are played or whatever, like or just even watching people's streams that people are switching to the A4 a bit more because the A1S is just like you can't just like at range body shot too much, and also like at really long ranges you can't even headshot body shot. You have to like headshot double tap their body or something like
Yeah.
that, which is really interesting. But like, I mean, I guess you guys haven't scrimmed, or I don't know what you've seen about the A1S Daps, but like,
No, we've been scrimming on
Oh,
like the
okay.
new patch the whole time. Like
okay, gotcha.
we weren't scrimming anyone on the old. Well, it's kind of like we're limit testing because we're scrimming on the shitty A1 and then we go get the good A1 in the match. So
There
it's
you go.
actually not bad. But my opinion is that I don't think it's as big of a nerf as people think. Like if you really think about the layout of a lot of maps, like those super long ranges are pretty rare, and then the like medium ranges, like on Mirage, there's a lot of like those medium to long range fights where like it will take one extra bullet body shot, but like most tier 1 pros are headshot insta body shot. And
Mhm.
I think it's still 2 bullets kill in that scenario for like the mid-range.
Most ranges, yeah.
To mid-range to slightly long range. It's still dink insta-kill. So, I mean, and you can still spam through smokes with no tracers, which is like huge.
And it's cheaper,
Like,
and you need a
and it's
the
cheaper,
economy angle
exactly,
is so
yeah.
big for CTs. If they want to string together a bunch of rounds, they need it.
If the A4 went to same price as A1, then you'd see A4 being used. Like 50. I'd say it would probably be like 50-50. But since the price difference, I think it's still going to be like 80-90% A1.
I don't
Like,
think it'll be 80-90. After
Really?
playing with the A4 a little bit, I don't think that it's going to be 80-90. I still think the A1 will be favored in general, but I would put it closer to like, I don't know, 65-35.
Really?
I think that the A4 does have its usage. The economy part does suck.
Yeah.
I think that is probably the biggest factor for me in terms of like which one will be used more. But I think that we are gonna see like a good. I think it'll be like more based around positions now than it has before. Like it is now. There is actually a choice to be made, whereas like before it was always A1S. Like regardless, it didn't make any sense to do anything else. Now I can see like certain spots and certain like maps like giving the A4 a slight edge. Like on Anubis even, I would see like I think we'll see a little bit more A4 usage than A1S actually.
I
Well,
mean, I started looking
potentially.
at some of the tournament stats for like the tier, like some of these tier 2, whatever, tier 3 circuits that are running right now. It's actually pretty close in terms of use rate. Like the A1S is still being used more, but for example, like this, I have no idea what this tournament is, but Epic GOCL Season 2, the Silencer is getting 14% of the kills, whereas the A4 is getting 10% of the kills. So it's like, it's pretty close actually now. But I mean, again, these are teams that we don't know if they're going to be indicative of what's the coming meta. But I think it's going to be a little closer than it's definitely not going to be 90-10. I'll just say that. Like I think it's going to be like, if I had to guess, 75-25, but 70-30.
Yeah, potentially, but it's one of those things where the second the whole tier 2, tier 3 scene seems like a tier 1 pro get an ace with the A1 again. It's like it's instantly just like
copy his crosshair, grab his config.
Like, well, people are like seeing people are using the A4 because like it has some benefits now over the A1, but the A1 still, if you really go through like a pro con list, like the A1 wins economy, mid range, it's still really good regardless of, like the damage drop off. So like I think time to kill is still quicker now. Like it would still be quicker if you dink insta shot.
Probably,
well, dink insta shot is better with the A4 just because of fire rate, technically. But like if you're talking about
the accuracy of the A1, and then also being able to spam through smokes.
Yeah, the thing is that at lower tiers,
I think there's more pros for the A1 still.
Lower tiers, you don't see as many smokes. You don't see as much utility. Or like, if you do, maybe it's played around very differently or whatever. Whereas at the uppermost echelon, like one thing we didn't cover in the op nerf because it seems like not really that impactful, you're going to not see anybody spamming ops, through walls or whatever. And as a ridiculous prediction, I will say the decoy will become bought a lot more because by oppers, because then you can throw the decoy and they're like, oh, he shot twice, get him, and then nope, I have all 5, baby. So that's gonna happen.
I agree with Note. I think it's gonna be more like a positional thing. Like you'll see like probably Hut, Nuke, or like Pit, Inferno, maybe like these spots getting like using A4 more, but I just like even on Mirage, like I don't see a Con or Cat player using an A4 like at all. Like there's so many positions where like the A1 just dominates based on like the situations they'll be put in.
The other thing is that I think just because we haven't seen the A4 used for so long, I do think people are underrating the multi-kill potential of it a little bit, just based on the fire rate and 30 bullets. Like people kind of do forget like how like. Yes, the A1S has a tighter spray. It has like it has a silencer and everything, but like the A4 does still have its advantages. It's just the A1 was so good for so long that it's kind of like, I don't know, I feel like people are almost a little jaded as to like just like they almost put the A4 much worse than it is in reality, whereas like yes, the A1's still better, but I think we will see like a little bit more of like a choice for some teams than
what I said can work the other way too. Just a tier 1 pro is a sick round with the A4 and
yeah, exactly.
Everyone starts using the A4 for a bit.
I think it'll be bit. I think my call is gonna be bit gets a good A4 round and then everyone's back. So
It could be. You know what I would like?
Uh,
I would like this
yeah.
this change to result in another change in like maybe a month or 3 or 10 because Valve. And I would like it to be that they remove randomness from the first bullet because that is ridiculous. The fact that there's it's for all bullets, but at a range there is a random spread that's like hard built into the guns. And if for some reason it's still in the game, even though this is a competitive shooter and it's about skill and not randomness. But the fact that the A1S is now going to require more headshots at range to kill people, or more shots in general, even if you hit the first headshot, it now becomes more appropriate to aim for the body because the odds of you hitting the head on, like, obviously this doesn't matter anymore because it was removed, but Dust 2 A long is everybody's favorite angle for this. It's like if you're sitting behind the barrels on Dust 2 A long and you're shooting down towards the ramp, the pit, it's like, okay, I'm gonna just miss this guy because some random number generator decided to give me the bad outcome versus the good one. I hope that gets exposed somehow by doing the tapping dance that people will do instead of spraying at range with the A1S now, and hopefully that means that we will actually see that removed. But I wouldn't hold my breath on that, I guess.
I do have a question for you guys. In that, do you think we'll see more A4 usage or more A1S usage for players who are like slightly more aggressive on CT? Like, so for example, like whoever's getting flashed into banana, like if Rain's getting flashed into banana on CT, or whoever plays close A ramp, like, do you think we'll see some of these positions pick up the A4 more, or do you think it'll be more A1S?
I feel like it could be. I mean, think about it. Like, it takes up less. Something that people don't really think about is a silencer sticks out super heavily. So, like, at the professional level, this does matter. Where you're almost giving them a quick tell when you're turning a corner, like just a little bit more sometimes because the silencer will stick out. So that's something that's probably an underrated and maybe not super impactful change. But if the A4 is picked up, you can go into more spots again. Like suddenly you can be in places that people just haven't been going to because of the fact that their gun sticks out, right? So that could be a big deal. Playing in smokes could now be a little bit easier too because of that. So yeah, I mean, I think for the Inferno side angle, it's definitely something that you could do just because you can spray for longer or you can maybe hold for more shots and stuff.
I think you're gonna still see people that are aggressive use the A1S. Like outside yard on nuke is just like sometimes like because you're gonna just do those smoke fights. So I guess it depends. It's not. I wouldn't even characterize it just position. Aggressive to passive, it would be more like position to position. So yeah.
It's like the maps that are close range and have a lot of smoke. Like I still think Inferno is mainly A1 personally. Like,
yep.
you're not going to see too many tier 1 pros with an A4 like full spam a smoke with an A4 and like their bullet trade. Like they're instantly going to die to a good player. Whereas like an A1, like it's very strong.
Well, it's also
even if that little damage drop off doesn't matter at all. Like you're just able to do so much more, I feel, with the A1. And like in terms of the hiding in corners thing, I mean, there's not too many spots where like a tier 1 pro would be like caught off by that. Like
I think that's a little less of a
players
factor.
like know where the gun sticks out and where it doesn't. Like Anubis, maybe not. Anubis, you'll probably see it happen, but
because it's a new one, they're still figuring it out. Well, the other thing too is that like the A1S is clearly the better gun as long as it's still like on par with the A4, it's clearly the better gun for arena games just because you can't hear nearly as well, right? So like if in the studio, maybe it doesn't matter as much, but in the arena, like sometimes it really will take a long time before people figure out where they're being shot from. So.
Every arena tournament I see now, playoffs, like there's at least one moment where an A1S gets like 2 extra kills it shouldn't otherwise because of sound. Yeah.
I mean, Valve should just make them cost the same. Like I'd say they're both pretty much equal at this point in terms of value if the A4 is the same price. Like I'd say it's pretty 50-50 if the A4 goes 2,900.
Well, it's actually a situational thing. Like if your position is something that benefits from the A4 over the A1S, then you're going to want that. But you can't buy them in the same game, and also they're at different prices. So
the thing is though,
right?
Do you think Valve are trying to make it 50-50 though? That's the thing. Like everyone talks about it. Well, the thing, like everyone talks about like trying to make it as 50-50 as possible. But maybe that's not what Valve wants to do. Like it makes sense for us in that sense.
Then, okay, but if that's the case, then let us buy both of them. Like,
exactly.
It's illogical. Like if you're trying to make one situational, then how the fuck am I gonna like switch it for certain situations? And it doesn't make any sense. Just like if you're only letting us pick one M4 in the loadout, then you have to make it 50-50 because it just doesn't make any sense.
The problem is that it's like hard coded into a game in the way that might not be able to do that. Just the way the
Yeah.
slots or something the game
Which
is
is
set up.
just
But yeah, I
its
agree
own
with
level
you
of
for
stupid,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that point though, like for sure.
Yeah, like I'm okay with it being like not 50-50, but then let us buy every gun in the game. Like fuck the loadout bullshit. Just let us select any gun during a match. And
Just
there you
disconnect
go.
from the server every time you die and swap to the other
So
import.
stupid. Imagine that does
Yeah.
start happening.
Just because we don't have like a ton of time left before Daps has to go, I think we should move into the Patreon question. I think that'll. Yeah, I think we actually probably need to move into that at this point, and then we'll probably just close it out there. Actually, so this is actually one that I actually would be curious for Daps because I'll say okay. So firsoch has asked, what do you think will be the highest and lowest performing rifler spot stat wise on Anubis? I think this is like a really hard question given that we have basically no data to work with other than our own experiences and the couple games we've seen on HLTV.
Like CT side?
Yeah, I
Or
think CT
both
side. Yeah.
sides?
Or
Okay.
okay, if you actually have an opinion on either, then I'm sure that this Patreon question would appreciate that.
Lowest performing. I mean, CT side probably the A anchor, I'd assume. I mean,
Yeah,
Not
you
as
don't
much
really have a
action.
lot of options.
Get
Yeah.
utilitied out all the time, yeah. That's
the guy's probably going to be like jiggling with a smoke half the time and then smoking when he gets contact, and then he's just like stuck trying to hold versus and execute. It's probably what's going to happen to him a lot. The people who are like able to rotate, yeah, the people who are able to rotate will have better stats, and I think the people at B have more freedom. But yeah, I'd say A anchor would probably be the worst rifle spot as a CT, and then T side, it's pretty hard to say. I mean, yeah, it depends on the style. There's too many variables to really give an answer for the T side one.
The T side one's tough because I don't think we've really established what like what do you
Yeah.
think is like proper like the most important map control? I feel like it's mid. I think mid is really
Mid-water.
important, like bridge,
Yeah, upper
bridge
and
area.
lower.
Yeah.
So that's going to be pretty contested, but I also don't know if it's going to be like a very a great fight all the time because it might just be a utility battle. I don't know if people are going to be like charging into that shit a lot. Like it's more like wait out utility, see what happens, and then kind of like people are going to feel things out. So
Yeah, I mean, if the
Yeah.
T's are like, I'm on the map right now. Like, if the T's are trying to like prevent any map control from the CTs, and it's probably going to be like 1-1-3 starts most of the time, and
So
like you're
three
going to
towards-
see. Yeah, because like the spawn, like I tested the spawns on like the TB guy, and the T has an advantage at the B main area for sure. Like they get there way before the CTs do,
Yep.
so the CTs would have to flash peek to have any chance there. And there's so many angles too, where it's like you can just anti-flash and just kill the guy if he peeks out. So it's like the T's pretty much have instant B main control, if you want to call it B main, and then the bridge will just be contested by utility. Like it's just gonna get stuffed both sides every round, most likely. And then towards A, that's where like the map control is. So yeah, it's gonna be like the T's are gonna go for underneath the bridge control, whatever you want to call it, like the water area, and then
canal
they're
or
probably gonna like flash A main off at the start, and that's like, gonna be like that's probably gonna be like the default you see at the beginning of the map, and then it'll evolve after that for sure.
okay.
Feels like to me
Any-
this might be another map that just like Ancient, where the bomb sites should be swapped.
I was about to
Oh,
say
names,
that same
the
thing.
names,
Yes,
yeah, the
please.
names, yeah. I think
Even
the
while
names
you're
should be
talking
swapped
about it
too.
now, I was like 113 just makes it like automatically it just makes it seem like that should be the A site regardless.
Yeah,
But even
yeah,
when I
yeah.
played it, it confused me because I was like, oh, like going into A site, this feels like it's a B site, and going into B site feels like it's A site.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I mean,
also with like
I always just
with-
go left or right from
Yeah.
the T perspective.
yeah. Also, like with the long position outside of the B site, and also the fact
Yeah.
that there's like a little bit more avenues into it, and even the site has like longer sight lines. With the when you like come into the site and you're looking
Yes.
towards CT spawn.
Yeah.
So it's just like it's for me that the B site feels or the A site feels almost like a little more closed off, even though the actual B site right now is like technically a little bit smaller. The A site just feels like it's like yes, there's large. It feels wider in terms of like atmosphere, I guess, but it still feels like slightly more closed off because it's more like there's not as many like
the entrances are
Yeah.
well there's like if you take mid control you kind of have like 3 entrances to
Yes.
B, but if you have normally you're kind of allotted just like 2 entrances to
So
B, and usually that's like it's usually the opposite where like A gets 2 entrances and B gets 1
Yeah.
entrance. Yeah.
But this is
mean,
actually like what
yeah.
I was gonna say when you were talking about like getting mid controls. I think it will be like probably one of the most important fights on the map because otherwise you kind of are really restricted into your entrances for like both bomb sites. Really, like
I agree with that to a point, but like to be honest, the CTs are stuck around. Like the CTs are gonna have to find ways to like push and take like that water control and push and
Yeah.
take B main. Like
very forward mid smoke or something,
because
right?
like if you're playing a tier 1 team and you don't contest any of this shit, they're just gonna exec on your site and like bait your utility out and you're fucked. And there's like
Yeah.
so many lurk spots too. Like it's a pretty T-sided map, I'd say personally. Like a lot of these fights CTs are gonna have to take. They're gonna have to like pretty much execute or like get a lucky timing to like take control of these areas because there's so many angles. Like
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah,
T's can
there's a
put a
lot.
lurker in any corner, and like you have to account for so much when you're a CT pushing on this map, and
Yeah.
it's like pretty risky too. Like they could just literally counter util you. You could like use 2 smokes to like take this water area, and they just molly A main, and then like you're burning a 3rd smoke to even like contest it and fight, and then they just anti-flash kill you. So then like a lot of teams are probably gonna have to turtle on sites at the start because they're not gonna have all those options, and then it's just up to like I think the CT's advantage is there's a lot of like one ways you can do. Like you get
Yeah,
one
there's a lot of
way, like the
elevation.
whole
Yeah.
there's a lot of elevation on the map. So like I think the way the map's gonna be played is like CTs are gonna save smokes on site and just like play around the smokes with like one ways, and that's probably what will happen at the start.
Yeah,
Because
probably at the beginning until people start developing their like CT aggro playbook.
like
Yeah.
there's one ways you can do middle on CT side. There's tons of one ways you can do it B, even at A as well. Like there's so many places you can throw like a smoke underneath and just peek over it. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be interesting to see how like T's deal with that, but and
There's
it's
gonna
gonna it's hard to say though. It's new map.
I
So.
just like that there's so much more, like just from playing it, there's just so much more you can do than you can do on like an ancient. It's just
Yeah.
like to me, this map is just going to be enjoyable to play, and it's going to be enjoyable to watch way more than either ancient or Vertigo. Like already,
Yep.
like
I think
it's
the
already
rotations
in my
are
good
better.
books. Yeah,
I think the rotations are better than Vertigo already. Yeah, I guess like, aggroing is like the one thing where Ancient's like okay actually for CT aggro, but like it kind of just feels like you're in the open a lot, like you're
yes.
mid or some shit. It's just like all right, like it's not. It doesn't feel that
I
unique.
also
Okay.
just like the fights on the map. Like the
Oh
actual
yeah.
duels on the map just
Oh,
feel different and original. Like
I
it's
love
not.
fighting on A. It feels so sick. It just is so. It's so unique. It's
Yeah.
just really yeah.
Yeah.
B fights too are pretty good too, actually. Like just
Mhm.
around all those pillars and broken walls and
B is
stuff.
the best for clutches, and A I think is just the best for site takes in general. Although A has some clutch potential, but you know, I think Bs are just like maybe Ts are just finishing B more often, so that's why I see more clutches. But that just seems really cool. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Daps.
layout wise, the map is a lot better than like Dust 2 Vertigo Ancient, but
Mhm.
I think there's too much elevation. Like I think they're gonna have to like pull back on some of this personally.
Yeah.
Like
Just make the
there's
levels
too
a bit
many
more
just like
consistent.
one ways
Yeah.
and things and like weird angles, and
Okay.
again that could be like a benefit of the map too. It's
We'll have
like
to see. Yeah.
there's always give or take. Like maybe they want it to be like that and it's just kind of unique in itself, and the T's have to account for like a million one-way possibilities. But
Yeah.
I think
There's
that's
good-
okay given the fact that it's right now hard to envision all the ways that CTs are going to get to be aggressive. So like they need a lot of defensive options in these sites if they can't like easily like I don't know how the CTs right now are going to push out of like a main into
Yeah.
like the boat area. Like it seems kind of hard. So unless I'm like you know, I know someone's going to come up with some like utility way to do it. Like that's going to be really clean, but like as it stands right now it seems like really like intense to try to like left eye peak all the way to get boat space. Like that's just hard. That's just really hard to imagine. Um, actually, right now, okay, really quick. We usually do shout outs at the end, Daps, but we have like a few minutes before you have to go. Actually, I want to know really quickly. You don't even have to explain this too much. Like, what's your map ranking right now? Like, if you had to go 1 through 7.
in terms of like what I think the best maps are,
Yeah, just best, like however you want to grade it.
I mean, I love Overpass. I've always loved Overpass. I put Overpass number 1.
Okay.
Probably Mirage number 2. I mean, people say it's boring, but there's still like so much you can do on Mirage. And like if you truly understand like how the map plays, like there's so many possibilities in my opinion still. I'd probably put Anubis 3
Okay.
Wow.
just cuz it's new and like
Yeah.
I
I
think
actually
there's
agree
a
with
lot of
that.
possibilities on it. So yeah, those are like my top 3, and then like I'll put Inferno number 4. I mean, Inferno again's not like too crazy, but it's always a good match.
Really clean.
Personally, yeah, it's like a scrappy match. It's always close most of the time. Vertigo's
Then you have
last, and then it's Ancient and
Nuke.
Nuke. Nuke's
Would you
kind
have
of
Nuke
boring
higher?
too, honestly.
Really? You don't like Nuke? Wow. Well, I mean, you guys don't play it, so I get it.
That's why. Yeah.
No, but even if we did play it, it's like it's a pretty like strat in the hat type map T side. I don't think. I guess like the only thing that really changed
Yeah,
on
I
like
kind of see that.
the only thing
Yeah.
that changed when I played Nuke compared to now is like the upper executes are more annoying to play against pretty much. But other than that,
Mhm.
like the smoke walls are the same. Like protocols for going lower are pretty similar. There's not like too much on it, but I'd still put Nuke above Ancient. Like Vertigo
Yeah.
Ancient would be my bottom 2 in terms of just the
Okay.
quality of the map personally.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's a good place to wrap this up. So usually at the end of these shows, we just do like brief shout outs. So I'll give you a
Okay.
second to think about yours, and I'll pick somebody else to do theirs first. So let's do Pronogo. What's your shout out for the week or for the show?
My shout out for the show is Nitro for immediately coming back after we talked about how he was kind of similar in rating to Hooksy, and then as in Blast Fall Finals, he obviously got that immortalized triple kill, or was it? It was actually 4K on the Mirage B site, and that was to help Liquid pull through against whoever they were facing, and I already forgot, maybe it was G2. And so that was pretty cool. Shout out to Nitro. Hopefully he's back in action for the World Final as well.
Okay, no. What's your shout out?
You know what? This time I'll shout out HLTV because there's an update coming. No. I think you guys will understand tomorrow when this post comes out.
Okay.
Okay.
There's a. I
Probably,
mean, it's not
yeah.
necessarily a feature, but it's like an update to something that I'm sure you especially, both you Daps and you Alex will be happy about.
Okay.
That's probably
Cool.
live
To hear.
now as you watch this, guys, because
No,
this is
yeah, exactly.
probably coming tomorrow. Yeah, so there you go.
Okay. My brief shout out is just a shout out to James, Cadian, and Kerrigan for
Okay.
being the 3 best IGLs in the world and showing that what's more important than individuals is IGLs. And that fits my narrative and my theories perfectly with how I viewed Counter-Strike for the last 10 years or whatever the fuck I've been talking about Counter-Strike. So, yeah, Daps, what's your shout out?
Fuck, I should have thought of one. I'll shout out Cadian for a good tournament win, and you know that he's went through a fuck ton of shit in his career, and I mean he definitely deserves it. So it's a big win, and shout out to him.
Yeah, the only
All right.
man who breaks equipment when he wins as opposed to when he loses. That's a shout out.
Big one. All right. Well, of course, we all want to say thank you, Daps, for coming on the show. Really appreciate your presence. Really had some great insight there, and I know that you guys are going to be practicing up for the World Finals. So good luck moving forward. Everybody from North America, all of our fate is resting on you and the 20 complexity fans and the 3 EG fans. So
There you go.
those guys aren't included obviously in this conversation, but yeah, let's go Daps. That's it. Thanks for the Patreons
Thanks for
once
having
again.
me on the show. Appreciate it.